and amazing stories so you don't have to.
Pay attention, you're going to learn something for a change.
This is a show about all of those things and much, much more.
You're blowing my mind right now. I hope someone's recording this.
So settle in, pour a cup of amazing coffee. He's a coffee snob, by the way. Crank that ghetto blaster and enjoy the 150,000 ranked podcast in the land.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
I think that's an exaggeration. It's the Brent on Tour podcast.
Any question?
Here's BD.
Welcome, friends, to another week of the Brenton on Tour podcast, live from the basement, not from South America, where, of course, we talked about last week is where I'm supposed to be. However, that changed. The artist I was touring with had to bow out, unfortunately, and I am back home recording episodes and thought, well, we'll just keep plugging away here, and life throws things at you, and we'll just keep banging out episodes, and I'll just keep hanging out with my friends who are on the show today with me, returning to the show as we move ahead here. And we're, coffee, music, travel, life. A huge thanks to my friend Tim Wendelbo from last week from Oslo, Norway. One of the best coffees in the world, one of the best coffee roasters in the world. And he made some time to come on and also to take back his title as the most downloaded episode in the land. And he certainly has a substantial amount of them, which will blow your mind that coffee could do that kind of business, but it did. And we're going to keep going with different stories and covering off things from, my travels around the world. But every now and again, I like to have a roundtable. Both of these gentlemen have been on the show before. And I like having topical conversations about what's going on in the music industry as well. So we're going to get into a few of them today. With my good friend Lyle Chasse. How you doing, sir? Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate being a part of the show with you.
No problem.
Good to be here.
And Darren Grieve, how are you, sir? Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Excellent to be here. Always a pleasure, buddy.
Hope you enjoyed that coffee episode last week. Because that one, that one's for you, buddy. That one's for you.
Yeah, exactly. No, you don't have to sell me on the coffee stuff. So he holds the title as most listened to, most viewed episode.
Can you believe that? Of all the episodes I've done, Tim, well, viewed, I mean, it's up for debate because it's on multiple platforms. But as far as most downloaded episode, he held the title for a long time.
Wow. And
we're talking like 5 to, close to 6-digit download numbers for that episode of coffee. And he's just one of the most popular roasters in the world. And has a farm and he's a great guy but he's part of a group of people that help sort of like set indie prices for coffee. And when Starbucks is paying 79 cents a pound, they're like, we're going to bump it up so the farmers can actually eat. So very cool, great business, great guy. And I like bringing him in sort of like a, the beginning of a hockey season. I like to bring him in at the beginning of my podcast season to update me on what's going on in the world of coffee. As boring as that might sound to some, it's actually quite exciting to people like Darren and I, as far as like, products and things like that. So it was great to have him on. And now we're switching gears back to the roundtable effect of things, where I like to, chat with my friends in the business about what's going on in the business, maybe some stories that we've heard, just some stuff. Some general stuff, that goes on. But before we do that, Lyle, do me a favor, reintroduce yourself to everybody, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, man. Well, what can I say? You get to say this when you're this old. I'm a veteran in the music business. I have hung out at CFOX since about 1989, met Danger and a bunch of other great people through CFOX. I've worked at a couple of labels, Sony Music, Capital EMI. Did 8 or 9 years of independent promotion, managing, directing some careers. And last couple of COVID years, did a couple of interesting pivots, made a merchandise company. It's going really well. And then about a year and a half ago, was asked to come and start up a new Vancouver-based label called Crank Music. So I'm busy building a roster over there and building a team to run it, to build some careers.
Lyle was a part of a big giant round table that we did, sort of a long table, not a round table, back on the only day it snowed in 5 years in Vancouver. Our
That
friends
was
did this.
nuts.
And we had a big long table, and you can watch that episode, and that was great. We had a bunch of people weighing in on some stuff.
Oh yeah, I think I worked with you on about 1,000 shows too, working with Live Nation
Just
or something.
probably 1,000
I
shows.
forgot about, I actually literally forgot about that for a minute. Sorry.
Which leads to my next guest, Darren, my coffee brother in crime, fellow coffee lover, doing just as much coffee content as I can possibly put out. He puts out even cooler stuff because they actually like him and they invite him into his stores to do things at Espresso Tech and things like that. He does those products and different various coffees, but he's also been on the show a bunch. He was the second guest ever on this show. We talked about tons of stuff. We did a huge show the other day on Twitter, on Spaces for fun. He's a great friend. But why don't you introduce yourself back to the people, and tell them who you are, my man.
Yeah, well, I mean, similar to Lyle, actually, around the same time I met Lyle is sort of when my radio career took off. That's pretty much what I've done since high school is radio, but it wasn't until the late 90s that things started taking off, working around music a lot more, meeting people like Lyle, meeting people like yourself, Brent. But yeah, I guess that's been my deal, just being around rock. I'm not good enough to play the music, but I figured if I could learn how to do a decent interview, maybe I could hang around, some people that know what they're doing. And so far, it's brought me to this day right here.
And you guys had a show together for a while, I believe, right? On CFox?
We did. We had a metal show called The Shop. Lyle and I did that for quite a few years. But the thing is, it should be noted that Lyle had the metal show on The Shop way before I was ever. I was still working in small market radio, but Lyle already had the metal show on The Shop. And what was it called? It was Power Drive, right?
Yeah,
Power Drive
with Robbie Gray, who of course went on to greater things over at TSN, is doing a bunch of great stuff in the sports podcast world now.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
And what kind of stuff were you playing there, dude?
Wow. Well, I mean, I don't know. First off, we would always selfishly play our favorites, but we would play a lot of shit that was coming to town, whether we kind of knew about it or not. I've always had a philosophy of just trying to support stuff. So there's always a band like playing on a Sunday night at some club that is going to be half empty or maybe even only 10 people in it, but that band might be from, God knows where. I mean, I remember the first time I think I saw Lamb of God in Vancouver, they were playing to next to nobody. And there was probably 40 people there. So it's kind of always been that philosophy of trying to find some bands that are on tour that, fit the genre, have a bit of a buzz. Maybe they got a label behind them, maybe they don't. And, if it's half good or half baked or whatever, then why not give them a shot? Because, I remember seeing bands like Metallica on Commercial Drive. It's like you never know where it's coming from. So we played, whoever's on tour kind of thing, and all the big releases. We would play do showcases on records, and a bunch of classics, and then of course indie bands. We were always trying to grab a decent local band and throw them on too.
Go ahead, Darren. Sorry about that.
I was just going to say what I liked about doing the metal show when you and I were doing the metal show, Lyle, is just the freedom that we had, 100% freedom. Management, if they're not necessarily were metal fans, right? So they let you do whatever you want. So when you say we selfishly played our favorites, that was kind of the deal. It was so great because nobody was looking over your shoulder, and you don't really get that in radio from being a jock with a regular day part where you're getting a proper paycheck and everything else. But if you do these, like a metal show or a punk show, most of the time you have 100% control over the music you play, so you can give a young band a chance. They don't know the difference whether the band's signed or not. Management doesn't. So do what feels good and just do it. And I found that I'll be honest, when I first started doing the metal show in particular, I thought that my reaction from the metal community was not going to be a positive one, because I was already doing the evening show on CFox, and I thought, well, metal bands, they're the underdogs, and they're not getting any love from big corporate radio station. And I kind of represent the big corporate radio stations, so they're going to chew me up and eat me out. It was completely the opposite. They were so stoked that somebody that had, kind of a cool position at a radio station gave a shit about metal. And so
Yeah.
I learned really quickly that my trepidation, I should have ignored that.
I was always amazed what in earlier concoctions of the show that was able to, same thing when C-Fox was still at 1006 Richard Street, and Jim Johnson was crazy enough to give me and a guy named John the mic on Monday nights. And we would play bands that would end up like filling up the P&E Forum. Like say, like we had Pantera and Skid Row playing at the P&E Forum, and that's 4,300 people.
Yeah.
For bands that had no airplay.
Except for you guys. Yeah.
Except for us. Yeah. And I mean, like,
Right.
when I say that, I'm not trying to say like pat us on the back for it, but it was certainly amazing to be a part of it and be a voice to the community and let people hear something that rips.
And how rad was that show, Lyle? I mean,
it was so good that we went to Soundgarden at the Commodore later that night.
There was some magic days back then with concerts too, man.
That's how good it was.
That show,
the crowd.
That show changed my life. I mean, the Killer Dwarfs, I remember meeting those guys backstage. That's when Russ was riding the trike, and I was like, "It's the Killer Dwarfs!" And then, God, you know, I was there, a new Pantera fan, but then Skid Row obviously was on fire with Slaves to the Grind. Kind of 4,300 isn't 10,000, but it was, you know, a nice intro. And I remember Pantera comes out with a wall of amps and a strobe light, leveled the place. I'd never. It was the show that changed my life completely. Changed my life. You know, so it was quite something. And
so to be able to do that, and then also like I remember like I had just been at what was known as College Music Journal or CMJ in New York. I used to go to that fairly regularly, and I was getting all hyped out by a bunch of guys from Epic Records about new bands, and we went to this little club that Madonna owned. I can't remember the name right now, and we saw this band called Rage Against the Machine. Wow. They were right at the beginning. Nothing was out yet. They gave us a couple cassette tapes to listen to on our flights home because, you know, CDs were kind of like still, you
remember cassettes?
Yeah, all the advances would come on cassettes because no one would play them on the air from cassette. So they gave us like 3 songs from Rage Against the Machine, and I'm like, oh shit, I can't wait to listen to this. Yeah. And we had a blast at the gig, obviously, and we got really, really turned on. But I mean, they were absolutely nobody. And then I came home and did the show, and then the next night somebody says, "Oh, you got to come down and see this band. You know, we were just at Soundcheck and blah blah blah. This band is really cool, and you'd really like them," because I love hip hop and soul and jazz and rock and throw it all in the blender. And as you know, that's kind of what you got with Rage Against the Machine. But we're all still so new to the party. And we went down this joint that was, I don't know if you guys remember, a place called the Cruel Elephant in Gastown.
I do, yeah.
And we went down there, and we went down. I swear to God, this is another one of those nights. There was no more than 12 people in the room. Wow. And we watched Rage Against the Machine in there. We ended up talking to the band after again because there's only 12 people there. And then they're all like, "Yeah, come back tomorrow night, man, because we're playing tomorrow night too." I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, well, that's how our tour's going, rolling out right now." So we went back the next night and watched them again.
Holy smokes!
Probably like 18 people there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you just never know what's going to happen sometimes, where the next thing's going to pop from.
And it's great that you guys, I mean, me as an indie musician back in the day, I mean, we killed for guys like you guys that would play, you know, indie stuff. And right up until, I mean, I think the last time, I mean, Danger, you and Todd had the 6 o'clock rock report, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And even there with the C-Fox and the band, you know, the Seeds and all the rest of it, I just remember it being so cool that you guys would play like Doug Fury's band and Murray Atkinson's band and Renee Botha's band and all these people had, and it was just like, these are all bands that I was trying to help when I had first moved to Vancouver. And it was just so funny to like, oh, there's no resistance. Oh, you're going to just play this? And I'd never seen, because in Toronto, it's like, well, you know, it was like if Bookman didn't recommend it, then no one was getting on the air. And that's just the way it was, the way it was in Toronto. It was like, you just couldn't get that indie air. Thankfully, Bookman played our band, which was awesome.
Yeah, he had a pretty good year though. Yeah.
But it was like, you know what I mean? But it was just it was so competitive there where it's coming out here. It was like, you're going to play it? Great.
Well, another lucky situation doing that rock report, because we had pretty much complete freedom. We would get we would get in shit the next day for a song we might have played that we shouldn't have played, something really heavy, usually something Lyle said, hey, I can get you guys Kerry King for the Rock Report. Okay, let's play Seasons in the Abyss then.
Yeah,
We'd
right.
hear about it the next day, but the damage was done and you got away with it. But most of the times, though, we get to do whatever we want on that show too. So I consider myself very lucky because that's two, neither one of those shows, the metal show or the Rock Report, was actually my main gig at CFOX. They were like side gigs that they gave me. But they were the most fun, to be honest, most of the time. I mean, my evening show was great, but I played what they told me to play for the most part. The Rock Report, when you say that, people were pretty open to playing indie bands, we thought that was the coolest part of the job. We would get and Lyle will remember this because he would be a part of that stuff too. When Seed season would come up, we would take all these submissions. Sometimes there'd be hundreds, 500-600 submissions, and we divide them up into 4 piles. And I would take a pile home. Todd Hancock would, Corey Price, Lana Gay when she worked there, Chris Duncombe. We'd all go home and listen to ours and weed out from there. And we would have meetings. And to me, anyways, I don't know what they thought at the time, but I just thought that was the coolest thing. High school me was stoked,
Yeah, especially when you find something, you find gold. And
Lyle, times,
Yeah, and Lyle, you're back. You've never really left it, but you are in the development of artists now too, and you're seeing that perspective now from the standpoint of like trying to break a band still in the process of trying to get a radio versus like streaming and all the rest of it. You're part of the new group of people that is trying to break a band in his current phase, and kudos to you, man, because
we all know it's brutal at the best of times.
Hard work.
You talk about the glories of rock and roll, and for every band that we say we saw here or saw there, and then they went on to be a gigantic band, there's 999 bands that failed before them.
Yeah.
And then there's 999 bands that we never heard of that never couldn't get out of their garage that might have been really good musicians.
So I wanted to get into a couple of subjects today that I figured we could probably chinwag on for a little while because I think both subjects are pretty near to both of us, or to all three of us here, and to the listener. That first and foremost, I want to talk about Taylor Hawkins and the 2 tribute shows that happened in obviously Wembley and at LA. I didn't get a chance to see the LA show. It didn't stream, I don't believe, the way the Wembley one did, but there is certainly an assortment of highlights coming back from all of those shows. I don't want to spend too much time on the tragedy of it because obviously we're going to try to do an hour here, but it was a very sad day for me. Obviously I found it, and listeners can listen back to my personal Taylor Hawkins story. When something like this happens, people kind of tend to make it about themselves. I tried not to. However, I did have a very excellent story to tell of him. And everyone I've met since that's met him also has one. And it's evident to me that this guy was everything to everyone at all the time and tried to be. And there's no further proof than that A, that lineup, and B, the impact that he had to be able to sell a Wembley and a Kia out in support of his tragic, to pay tribute to him. So, first and foremost, Darren and I have kind of gone around this a little bit. We'll come around back to that. But Lyle, thoughts on Taylor and thoughts on those 2 tribute shows and sort of takeaways for yourself?
Well, obviously we don't need to say it enough times, but it was absolutely tragic. I remember when I got the news from a friend of mine who lives in Nashville, so it was breaking through the Nashville music community. And my wife, who's also in the entertainment business here in Vancouver, we're both big fans, so it wiped us out. But really quickly, we've all been around a lot of shows and seen a lot of things, and we've lived through some of the best days of hard rock. And it really, I thought about it, processed it really quickly in the fact that I looked at my wife and I said, you know what they're going to have to do, right? And she's like, what? And I said, the only way through this for Dave Grohl and that band, because they're so well known, they're that band that everybody hangs out with and vice versa. The only way through this, because Taylor was such a massive part of that band, if they want the band to succeed, they're going to have to do a massive tribute concert equal to what Queen did for Freddie Mercury. And I literally said that within like a couple minutes of learning it. It was like, that's the only way they're going to work through it. And then that same night, again, I was talking to some other friends in the industry, a major journalist. And I'm like, dude, you know, what do you think about this? And we were talking about it. Then I said, you know, the same thing. I repeated it to him, and he's like, you're absolutely right. The only way they're going to get through this is to work through a concert, get all the same friends together and celebrate music together and just be friends and be musicians. And they're in such a unique position in life that they get to entertain and they get to play, and they're sick musicians, that the only way to go through that pain is to just do what they love in honor of him. So they did the right thing to work through the pain and remember a friend. I was blown away that there was a second show. I, like a lot of people, haven't seen the whole second show. But it was amazing to have the first one at least show up on a Saturday morning, at least for us here in the Pacific time zone. It's kind of nice to just sit there and drink back a lot of high grade coffee and get whacked out on sit on Twitter and put a ton of comments out there.
Darren, thoughts, buddy, on Taylor in general and the tribute?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did on that Saturday. Was sit there with coffee, and I thought I would watch an hour or so of it, and then I would get on with my Saturday. But I was riveted. I didn't get out of my pajamas till 4 p.m. I didn't move from the couch until it was over. Thoughts on Taylor Hawkins? You know, the impact. To me, it's almost twofold. I mean, Foo Fighters is a band. If you like rock and roll at all, you're going to like the Foo Fighters. If you like metal, you don't hate the Foo Fighters. If you like super poppy stuff, you're going to like them too. Like, nobody doesn't like the Foo Fighters. And his personality, he's kind of like Dave Grohl. You can't not like Dave Grohl. He's just a very likable guy. You never hear a bad word about Taylor. And he just seemed like just a wonderful, wonderful guy. When you hear about these tragedies in rock, it's so often, it's sad to say, and we've had a couple in the last few years that don't fall into this category, but a lot of the times you can kind of see it coming. You know, they're a bit of a train wreck. They've had some ups and downs with substance abuse or whatever. And certainly Taylor had his history, but he seemed to have his life together, and he had a personal life, and he was smiling all the time, seemed like a happy-go-lucky guy. And I think that just kind of rocks a lot of people, no pun intended. It makes it really tough to swallow. And he used his powers for good. I mean, here's a guy who's in the biggest band in the planet, and he took every opportunity he could to jam with his heroes. That's what you should do. I think if I was in a band, that's what I'd be doing. Like, Jimmy Page knows I'm alive. Well, get him in. Let's play a song together. This would be awesome to tell my kids that I played with Jimmy Page. To me, there's a guy that lived his life. He took full advantage of the position that he was in, but was not a dick throughout the process either, like so many people can be.
And then Taylor and Dave and company had all been a part of such great projects prior, that they had spent 25 years building Foo Fighters into what it was. And they were now going next level, all in, if on top of all in. Yeah. They were becoming a stadium rock band, not just an arena band anymore. They were becoming a stadium band, and their management was working their tail off to make sure that they were a part of everything, because they did get along with everybody. And you said it well there, that it doesn't matter what genre of music you knew who the Foo Fighters are, and you like their music. You can't hate it. Yeah. They just became that band, and they represented rock so well in a world where everybody was saying rock is dead. And you know what? They got on the stage and they're filling up stadiums. And then, as evident by all the persons of multiple genres and styles and just skill sets, look at all the types of people that came together for them, including Canada's own surviving members of Rush got together to play these shows with them, not just once, but twice.
And James Gang got back together for him.
James Gang got back together. I mean, what a powerful thing for rock and roll in general. And that's just it. I mean, these are the guys who showed up wearing their Vans and some, faded black jeans and a dirty old T-shirt with the sleeves cut off.
And some Van Halen trunks, as you can see, Josh.
I mean, getting Wolf to get on stage and play his dad's music, I can't even imagine what that dude was going through.
Well, I think that's it's not the biggest takeaway from that thing. Obviously, everyone coming together was a huge thing, but for those of you that aren't familiar with the story, obviously Eddie Van Halen passed away. His son, is everything. He was everything to his son, and he's the consummate musician. Played everything on his record, put out a great solo album. and consistently got hammered in the press. Well, not the press, by the Twitter heads,
by the
about
public,
by the public.
by the Van Halen
you know,
fans of
yeah,
old.
like why aren't you playing?
Right.
Why aren't you paying tribute to your dad? And why aren't you playing Van Halen songs live? And Wolfie's always been, this is going to be my project. This is the way it's going to be, and has always denied it. And I loved this moment of him coming out and absolutely destroying both shows. You can see the highlights online. I mean, it's the feel of Ed. It's the sound. The solos were perfect, and it was a giant fuck you to everybody that was busting his balls for months. And it's the fact that it happened at this event, which brought a bit of like light to a dark day.
Yeah.
Like everyone that is in the know is going, holy shit, look at this.
There's
and not
no
only
question,
look at,
yeah,
not
it
only
was
look at this-
therapeutic for him, right?
yeah.
It was a tribute within a tribute.
Right.
It was unbelievable. And like, is Dave the only guy that could have made that happen? Like, and let's just go the other way. Like, if Taylor tragically didn't pass away and the Foos were still doing a thing and they took Mammoth on tour with them, which is his solo band, to open up, would Dave have been able to convince him to come out and do Van Halen? And I don't think he would have.
Not for no reason. No, the reason was the timing. This was the right reason, but no, if you're just going to be on the road with them and say, get up and play a Van Halen song with us, I don't think he would do it. No.
I think it was to honor great rock and roll in the beginning, and then he just felt like it was a great way to honor his dad. And I don't think he was really trying to silence the critics, but that's what ended up happening because
absolutely,
he didn't wake up with that mandate, but he's a smart, young enough guy where he definitely has the fuck you in his attitude, and he's not afraid. He proved that he can do what his dad did. He proved that he is his dad's son. Not that he needed to. If you listen to his record, it's a damn good record.
Hell yeah.
For your very first record.
And the thing I don't understand about the Van Halen fans that have been hammering him so much is, I mean, if he came out and was trying to be like his dad and cover Van Halen songs, everybody would be ripping him huge for that.
Mm-hmm.
He'd have no respect, and he would never have any hope in carving his own path. In my opinion, Wolfgang could be, they say rock is dead. I don't think so, and I think Wolfgang is a prime example of how it's not dead. He's going about
not when you've got the youth leading the charge. Look at this. Obviously we're well aware, and I wasn't expecting this at all. And it was absolutely heartbreaking for me as a drummer, just as absolutely, as a father, number one, that was extremely tough. We're all parents on here. So for me, it was just like, sports have their moments where dad passes the baton to the son, or the Griffeys play together in a field in Seattle, or all these different things that have kind of happened, or brothers do, play against each other on the ice. But how often do we get this outside of a family band? But how often do you get this sort of like moment like this? And unfortunately under these circumstances, but the kid just
he was fantastic. Yeah, no, I'd nenever seen him play before, obviously, before this, but
and we're obviously speaking about Taylor's son, Sean here, which is a picture of him for everyone listening. There's a picture of him playing My Hero, and I think he did it again in LA too. Yeah, so
there's a lot of great kids out there from the descendants of great rock and roll parents, and you know what? They're worth checking out. Like, I can't remember Bono's son's name, but like he's got that band called Inhaler, and they're just insane.
Oh, is that his band? Is that his kid's band?
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
I know some things about some things, but I didn't know that about them.
It's so good. Like, I don't know. It's just so refreshing. And a lot of people would say it's U2 2.0 or whatever the heck you want to call it, but
it's heavier. It's heavier.
It actually is. It's really cool. The production on it is super sick, but there's lots of great stuff out there. I remember a couple of years ago, wasn't it what's his name, the drummer from Aerosmith? His son got up and jammed here when Aerosmith were in Vancouver. And it's just like, there's lots of great kids out there.
Well, Roger Taylor's kid, Roger Taylor's kid.
Unfortunately, they live in their parents' shadows. They haven't written the songs that their parents did. There's Nick, Gene Simmons' son, has messed around with music, and his daughter Sophie. I mean, they all mess around with music, and they make some pretty good stuff. There's the guys in Nickelback here are at Canada's Own. Like, some of their kids are starting to spawn off and do some projects now. There's lots of great shit out there, and unfortunately, we just get hung up on the great stuff, and it's great for a reason. But again, I mean, I don't know. This might sound selfish in a statement, but I'm still that guy who likes to just go curiously watch for that next band, and you find out, oh, you're somebody's son or daughter or whatever, and it's really cool. And they want to come at it the same way their parents did. They want to get out there and slug through some clubs and make some songs and build a career. It's unbelievable, and there's a lot of that happening out there.
Inhaler just announced a show in Vancouver for next March, by the way, just today.
Yep. I'll be there.
Or are they playing Commodore or something? Probably. Gentlemen, so given that, you think about all the artists that we have, and every artist that passed is probably worthy of a tribute, right? In some capacity, like, whatever, if anyone that we collectively grew up on, passes. Freddie Mercury was the last one, the big tribute show that I remember, it being so impactful. And this one here, that Freddie Mercury show changed my life from the standpoint of, like, I'm going to do Wembley one day. It was just one of those things that ingrained into my brain, and I ended up doing it. Will this show have the same impact on somebody watching, like a kid that's like, who was Taylor, or that didn't know? Why is everyone paying tribute to him? That idea of why did he have such a big impact that he could fill Wembley and the Forum. So my question is, who could do it next? Tragic. I don't want to promote this. I'm just saying, is there somebody on a level, or did it happen because of the circumstances? Because artists pass away all the time. But who
Danger, you work around media a lot more from that perspective. Maybe you're better to start that answer than I.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really. I don't want to pick up an artist either. That's kind of a weird kind of a.
I'm not manifesting it, but if it's the impact that he had on us as music fans, and the impact that he had on rock and all the rest of it, that could be that every single Lars and all these different. They haven't even done a tribute to Eddie Van Halen yet. I'm just saying, like,
no, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to get at. Is they haven't done one for Eddie Van Halen. That's more of a Van Halen thing, I think, than anything else. But like Chris Cornell. Obviously a very huge, impactful artist. There was no real tribute show for him either. So maybe it speaks more to just sort of the whole vibe of Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl and what their friendship meant to each other, Taylor and Dave. That they, as we sort of mentioned off the top, they spent a lot of time jamming with their heroes, and they did side projects like Them Crooked Vultures and Probot, the metal album. Dave did that, and so they've always been adventurous, playing around with other bands, and so it kind of made sense that they might throw a big tribute show like this together. They certainly have the friends to pack Wembley, obviously, because they played music with these people before, and maybe that had a big part to do with it. I don't know who else. I don't know. I mean, anybody that's made any impact deserves a tribute. You're right about that. Who else could pull that off? I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I have the answer to that.
The big part of it is, I think we've all had the pleasure of meeting Dave Grohl, the three of us. And if you know Dave Grohl and you've been around him for more than 5 minutes, you realize he's quite authentic. He's not just this cutesy guy when you turn on the mic. He's the same guy pretty much on mic as he is off mic. And he really lives it. And again, I think that when you look at the type of person that he is, how is he supposed to get back on the stage with his, basically there was him 1 and 1A being Taylor, and they were two of the same, and so their personalities were very similar, and I just think he just did what maybe he thought somebody would do for him if it was him. And they were just such a friendly bunch of rock and rollers. They were an attitude. They weren't necessarily a genre. They were just the attitude of pure rock and roll, and in all styles of it, whether it was a ballad or whether it was an all-night ball breaker. They knew how to put it together. And so, I mean, you can say like, who else can you do it for? Well, I mean, hey, there's still some great legendary musicians alive: Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Paul McCartney, Elton John. I mean, there's kind of that plethora to go to. Back to the 60s, 70s band. You could have had a concert for Tom Petty. Everybody loves Tom Petty. I mean, there's a lot of artists to look at. Then you go through the 90s and all the artists that from the 90s that have passed away. But what also is troubling sometimes for the families in the estates, and selfishly as rock and roll fans, we think, geez, I want a rock concert out of this. That helps us. But sometimes for the families in the estates thereof, it's very, very difficult for them to pull it off. There's a lot of legalities, unfortunately, to pulling these things off too. And a lot of things have to be considered when doing these things to global audiences, and the cost factors of bringing in musicians from all over the world. Who's going to cover that? Like, that's why it took several months to put this together. Brent, as a guy who's also worked on a gazillion concerts, just the logistics of putting that together, the rehearsals, the costs of putting in let's fly in Rush. Well, Rush were rehearsing for 2 weeks to be able to do that. They didn't just plug in some amps. They're professionals.
It was amazing to me that for me, I was doing a show that day. So I was in Dallas. I had it on in the background. Guys were coming into my office watching, and I was blown away. It was so smooth. It was the best mixed show I've ever heard on through TV / YouTube, through anything. It sounded incredible. It really just sounded amazing. Like,
really
it
did.
sounded like you were there. It just puts you there. It was unbelievable. It was the ultimate tribute show for me.
To me, that's Dave, though. That's Dave Grohl. He'd want to put all their money together. If that thing cost him $10 million, he didn't care.
It was the best tribute. I mean, the Freddie one was great, but obviously the tech has come along since then, and we're even in a better spot than then. And I think this moment, to your point, Lyle, proves what that moment was. And this is Dave obviously having a bit of a breakdown at times like these in Wembley. I mean, that's 5 months of him not saying anything to the press. That's 5 months of prepping this concert, rehearsing with people. Apparently his mom passed away, which I just learned a little while ago.
I was going to say,
during this whole thing,
he's had his own losses.
That's the moment. Like, right. That's like everything just like going, just coming out. And then, you finish it on a high with his son. And I think, by all accounts, from everyone I spoke to, that the LA show was not a party, but it was a bit of a different vibe. It was a little bit more of like, if the Wembley show was the I don't know how to put it, like, not the wake, but if it was sort of like the emotional tribute, the LA show was the celebration.
Right.
It was, from by all accounts. And
it's amazing that they actually went to the trouble of doing it twice, because it's very, very emotional to do it once, never mind doing it twice, and then doing it on another continent, pardon me. But both shows seemed really special. I didn't get to see all of it. We watched some of it, the Def Leppard stuff. There was some other more unique combinations on stage. And just, what can we say? I would say, as rock and roll fans, music fans, don't get too used to this. These are very, very amazing events for a reason. They're not easy to pull off just from a logistics standpoint, but legally they're difficult to pull off. And again, if you've lost anybody in your life that you love, father, a sister, a friend, whatever, man, it's heartbreaking. And imagine standing there in front of 67,000 people at Wembley and getting out there and having to perform for 2 hours, and coordinate it all and sort of be the host and take people through stories and go through
when they walked out,
all the things they go through all night. Like, it's insane that how many times
when they walked out on stage for the first time, that was the first time any of us had seen Dave.
Yeah.
Well, he'd been poking around. He hung out at a couple of Springsteen shows. Sure. He hung out at a couple of other things and got on stage a little bit. If you really want to dig, he started showing up at some things, and that's good. It was obviously therapeutic. You got to get back on the horse a little bit. Yeah. Good for him. Again, not easy to do. I never thought that he would stop. What's going to happen with the Foo Fighters now? That's a whole other story. Nobody here has that answer. I don't think they have the answer. but it's, again, I just think that as a public, we should be fair in what we expect from this.
Absolutely.
We get what we get, and just enjoy it. Download it, spend the $30 if there's a download or whatever the hell, and support the family, support rock and roll. Hell, just enjoy it, man.
Danger, final takeaway from those two shows? Like your favorite parts or a super highlight for you? That was
you know what I was thinking a minute ago is when you flashed up that photo of Dave having his breakdown during times like these. I kind of was waiting for it to happen earlier in the day during the show, because I thought, boy, it's got to be a hard day. And like Lyle said, he's also the host. He's running around. He's not just sitting there on a stool backstage waiting to go back up on and play guitar. He's trying to keep it together. He's got Taylor's kids there. Obviously, he's like a father figure to them. So I kind of expected the breakdown to happen earlier. The song makes sense. Times like these, I could see that'd be a tough one for him to perform. To me, I don't think I've seen anything like that since maybe Live Aid. I put it up there with a Live Aid. And I think music people like us will be talking about this in 20 years and 40 years. This show will not be forgotten. The LA show, I hope they do something with it. I sure would have liked to have seen it.
I was searching everywhere and I'm like, but
I found clips here and there, but just piecing it together. But
they're probably piecing together an album / I'll say DVD.
That's what I was
on the physical side of it.
Yeah.
Some sort of a download. I think that they want to make sure that this gets done, but get it, or maybe they're going to package both shows.
Yeah.
But again, there's an insane amount of legalities to all that crap.
Yeah.
Not to get too much into that, but again, look, we got what we got out of it. The only other thing I could say is, who else might they do this for? Well, they might have to do it for, unfortunately, Dave Grohl himself at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But enough. I mean, they might just try to pass the baton back and say, well, you did this for one brother, why not the other? And so maybe we see that. And what's kind of, I was going to throw this at you guys, almost not to get out of this, but similarly, us as rockers, hard rockers, is that recent announcement of like the Pantera reunion with a couple of other members joining the surviving members, and it's like there's also like those kinds of things that end up happening in rock music. And what do you guys think of that as hard rock guys, with like Zakk and Charlie getting up there with surviving?
I have an opinion, but I'll let Darren start with that one. We'll move on to that subject right now. Lyle, thanks for bringing that up. We'll actually go into there
because it's kind of related, and I thought
no, it's all
maybe
good.
We can throw that out there a little bit amongst us.
Let's do that. We'll move on. It's the Rock Report, right? We'll move on from Taylor. An amazing tribute to him. He will be greatly missed. An incredible production. Performance by everyone involved, and to me, the ultimate tribute to him. So yeah, he will be missed. Moving on. All right, Darren, you get to be the first one to weigh in on Pantera.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, my instincts say this is kind of bullshit, and I'm not happy about it, I guess. It's a tough one because I've heard, I have good friends of mine that are metalheads in the same age category as me, so they have the same mentality when it comes to this kind of stuff, and they're kind of on board with it. So I've tried to listen to what they have to say. Obviously, Zakk is not a bad choice. He was super good buddies with Dime. He certainly can play the material. I understand that he's going to be using Dime's gear, so it's probably going to be a pretty reasonable facsimile. Charlie is no slouch on the drums, and he was buddies with those guys too. So again, probably not a bad choice. Will I go? I mean, I'm not sure yet. I mean, I know it would be interesting to watch the show. Would I feel like I'm at a Pantera show? I just can't imagine that I would ever feel like I'm at a Pantera show. That's just how I feel about it. And I have no disrespect to Rex or to Philip, but I don't know, man. I'm sure the show will slay. It'll be great. Yeah. It'll certainly make money. But am I going to walk out of there feeling like I just saw Pantera? And there's just no way that can be, man. The estates of the brothers have apparently, given their blessing to it. So I respect that, I suppose. I don't know why they're doing it though. Like, why are they doing it if it's not just for money? Like if it's not
right, and that's why I'm saying when you talk about tribute concerts of anybody, this is a touring tribute concert.
Well, they didn't announce it. Here's the thing, though, I don't mean to cut you off, but when they announced the show, and you both remember this, they didn't say shit about it being a tribute.
Well, I'm calling it a tribute, but I mean,
Well, no, but they did a few days later. They started turning, it's more of a tribute, but they didn't say that initially. They just said it's Pantera and it's going to be these guys. So they kind of backpedaled a little bit.
I was doing a show in Luxembourg and had heard rumblings out of the blue. And it was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and it just...
It's a little surprising. I think they could have done a little better lead up to it. Maybe they could have done a couple special shows first and see how it goes.
Good point. Because it was
like a lot of things. It's like just go to the fucking Rainbow and destroy it, and or not the Rainbow, but I mean the Roxy or something in Hollywood, or go to some old place in New Jersey or something like that, and get the boys from Anthrax up there, or of course Zakk's from New Jersey, and just go do something down and dirty first and see how it rolls. But to announce a whole tour feels like, for a lot of fans, of course, feels like a cash grab. But having said that, I think there's the metal community never really there's the big four, and then there's Pantera. They were sort of like the big five, if there was such a thing. And we never, as a community in the metal community, never really had that opportunity to do that. There was a few things happened when Dime passed away. There was a few tribute things, like at Guitar Center and whatnot. They did a pretty cool tribute, and again, Zakk was a huge part of that. But then when Vinny passed away, it was just sort of like, oh, bang, this whole thing's over, because his all the other projects he was involved with, everything was over. And now a few years later, all of a sudden this just sort of shows up. Having said that, they all had a bunch of great friends, and I think with Charlie being in there and him being a part of Anthrax, and Scott's a huge fan and friend of those guys, you're going to see some pretty amazing nights from market to market where this person's going to get up and that person's going to get up, and you're going to see a little bit of what we saw in that cycle of like what we saw with the Taylor thing. I think you'll see different persons from the metal community get up on stage here, there, and everywhere. And the internet will be abuzz with content if they want to pull this off in a correct way.
You know what though, Lyle? I gotta tell you though, man, that it's already been happening, and I don't mean this I definitely don't want to disrespect the brothers or anything, because I'm a massive fan. That band changed my life. The issue is that you had Down already, right, going out and doing their thing. So Phil's been out there for years doing it, and then Phil went out and added 19 other metal bands that he was doing, and then he went out with Phil and Selma in the Illegals. Now that was the Pantera tribute band. Yeah. That was the band, and you can check that stuff out online. I mean, that band played as close to Pantera as I've heard, and they pretty much nailed it, and it was great. And the problem there is that what made Pantera so absolutely like visceral, it was the combination of the four of them. And you could say that about anything and any band that swaps out a person.
Say that about any original band.
Any original thing. But what made it so visceral? Phil and Selmo, like, ready to level the place. And the brothers Abbott partying, and Rex just kind of holding down the fort. Yeah. Phil isn't visceral anymore. No. If you watch the Illegal stuff, Phil can't get there. So it's
tough to sing that hard, man. Even if you're 25,
it's Phil with a back problem, and And this isn't out of disrespect, but it's Phil with a back problem. It's not Phil ready to punch the front row. So then you've got Zakk coming in, you've got Charlie coming in, and me as a massive Pantera fan, and I know the business side of it. The difference between Phil and Selmo and Illegals and the name Pantera is about $950,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sure. So that there's that, obviously, and we're all aware of that. But to your point, Lyle, if they went and started just quickly, slowly dropping club shows around and beta testing it, and then dropping 4 shows, and these are the 4 tribute shows, I think they've had to pedal back. I think they've had to kind of go, it should have been called Anselmo Brown Wylde and Benante, and that would
Yeah,
have
but then
even,
you only play the Commodore and you don't play an arena. You know what I'm saying? Like you're,
I think you get more leverage out of it than the illegals.
yeah,
Darren,
but then you
what do you
can't
think?
get these guys. You can't make this. Those guys will not go out. Again, it does become a money thing. Like Zakk Wylde is worth X amount on his own. He's worth X amount being a night, being in Ozzy Osbourne's band. He's worth X amount showing up on someone else's record. Like those guest appearances are not free, folks. Shocker. So, if they're going to do it, they got to get paid. They're only going to do it if they can do it under the brand of Pantera, just like David Gilmour calls Pink Floyd, even though Roger Waters isn't there. And you can get into debates like that, right? You can debate Kiss when Kiss has been called Kiss for the last how many decades with only half of an original lineup. So you get into these debates. We can't change what we can't change. We don't control this. I just would have liked to see it start a little bit differently. Like I said, just a couple little underground shows, get it off the ground, see how it goes. And if they really jive and it really kills, then okay, sure, put together 30 dates, but don't turn it into something where it's like, oh, we're going to do 60 dates in Europe and 60 dates in America. It's like, I don't know. Keep it special.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the comparison as well. Just can you imagine Van Halen going out without Alex or Eddie? How could you possibly call it, as great as Michael Anthony is, and whether it's Dave or Sammy, whatever, how could you possibly make that comparison that it's Van Halen, It's just not. And I feel that Pantera is a band that's kind of like that. Those two brothers,
I agree. Like I'm a stupid Van Halen fan, as you guys probably know, and the audience might know. The Van Halen tribute concert that they've talked about going, I don't know that I'd really want to go.
We just saw it. At the Taylor Hawkins. Well, I saw the best Van Halen performance in 25 years at that Taylor Hawkins show. That's the best one.
And it's not a shot at anybody, but I mean, what made Van Halen so incredible was Eddie Van Halen. Not that, unfortunately, Alex is just as talented, but he got outshone by his brother.
Yeah.
And again, the other guys with, the other parts of Van Halen were always incredible as well, but it was Ed who held it down and made it absolutely next level. And with him not being there, I don't know that I need to see it, because I don't want to watch Joe Satriani all night or whoever's going to fill in. I mean, it would be cool, but I just feel like I was also lucky enough to probably see 30 or 40 Van Halen shows. I don't need to see Joe Satriani doing Van Halen to feel like.
There you go. That's a great point.
That's how I feel about Pantera too. I've seen him enough, and but my son never did. So,
but then I was going to say, there's the next gen rock fans.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny? Somebody said you're all going to complain about it, and you're all going to go see it. And it might have been Corey from Slipknot that said that. He goes, everyone's going to complain about it, and everyone's going to go see it. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're all watching a bunch of weird Star Wars stuff on Disney these days just because it says Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like people will check out things under a certain brand. It's just the way it works. That's branding.
I am curious, but I think that I think Phil did a great job with the illegals. I thought that was really cool. I'm not, the star thing doesn't do it for me. And Charlie, from what I have been told, has got a carpal tunnel syndrome. So to me, I don't even think he's going to make it through these anyways. So it's going to be like a half, then it's going to be like the third drummer from this. And then it's like, oh, Zakk can't make a show. And then it's just Phil and Rex. And then it's a whole thing. So anyways, interesting to see.
I may go see the show, but I will not buy a shirt. How about that?
There you go. Last subject, guys, before I let you go. We added that one. Lyle, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, it's just like, you're making me feel like I'm part of the 6 o'clock rock report. Look at this shit. It's great. Last one for you guys. This happened a little while ago. I think it was in the last couple of weeks. Very controversial subject that's been kind of happening in the world it's been happening forever, but it's really taken shape over the last, I would say, year. Maybe a year and a half, with Eddie Trunk, Eddie Trunk, obviously the radio host and DJ, and he's got his podcast and that metal show and all the stuff that he did. Really has a problem with bands using tracks. And Ron Radke from a band called Falling in Reverse had made a statement that they couldn't show up to their show in Nashville because their tour manager forgot their laptop. And Eddie went on a rant about, not being able to play a show because you forgot your laptop. What happened to good old rock and roll and no tracks? And Sebastian Bach, as we know, is very much a proponent of playing live with no tracks and all the rest of it. But as we all know, how many bands actually use track all the time to kind of enhance their show, but also it adds some things. I'll just give you a couple of examples that have happened recently. Obviously, Kiss drummer makes mistake, backing vocal tracks exposed at a recent show, and video appears to show Motley Crue using backing tracks for drums. Both of those from Loudwire, but out on the internet for you guys to see. And this is a tweet that Ron from Falling in Reverse laid out. You want to talk hella shit about laptops, but go watch Kiss lip sync. Steven Tyler plays the piano. Then halfway through the song, he stands on top of the piano while it still plays. Yet here we are acting like they all don't use tracks. Aerosmith have a keyboard player, Ron. Take it down a notch. And Sebastian Bach, are you trying to say that you believe that I use tracks on stage? And, there's just a big pissing match happening online about this very subject. Gentlemen, go. What do you think of backing tracks? Go ahead, Darren.
Backing tracks, I think that's not really the case, though, with Falling in Reverse. I think this is a band that has a lot of electronic elements to their tunes, if I'm not mistaken. I don't claim to be the biggest fan of these guys, but you're not going to go to a Nine Inch Nails show and not have some kind of electronic, something not organic on the stage, or Filter, or, any number of bands that we, Ministry. So I kind of feel like they're taking now, again, I'm not super familiar with Falling in Reverse, but to my knowledge, that's what the laptops are. It's not necessarily backing vocals. And with Tommy Lee I'd rather hear Motley Crue using backing vocals than hear Vince Neil sing live any day.
You're not wrong lately, for sure.
But I think that's what from what I understand of Falling in Reverse, it's not necessarily backing tracks. It just seems like they're a band that has a lot of electronic elements in their music. So the show would be pretty lame without it.
Yeah, it's part of what they do. There's a lot of special effects in just about everything in entertainment. And we're using them right now. We're all sitting in our own houses doing what we do. Thanks to technology, we're allowed to do a lot of things that allow us to do connect and enhance what we're doing. And rock and roll is no different. Pop music's no different. It's been going on for decades. And look, these shows, these tours are worth multi-million dollars per night when you hit the arena level. There's anywhere between 30 and 130 people on the touring crew whose jobs are dependent on consistencies of tours and shows. And so when you buy a ticket for today's high prices, go to an arena show or even just a decent theater show at, say, the Rickshaw or something is going to cost you between 30 and 60 bucks. People want consistency. And, hitting backing vocals is really hard. You're working with different PAs, you're working with different climates, you're working in all kinds of stuff. So if there's a little bit of enhancement onto it, because again, it doesn't necessarily always mean that the backing vocal is full backing vocal. It's usually just basically like there to help the other musicians hit the notes and know the timing of it. And give the audience some enhancements so that it actually sounds correct. And give them, what they paid for, which is a show and entertainment. So I'm okay with it to a certain degree. If it takes over your show, that's another thing. I mean, that's what EDM is. I mean, you watch all these DJs do what they're doing. People seem to not give a shit there. You get what you get out of it. Everybody uses a little bit of it. I have the pleasure of knowing Eddie Trunk. I have the pleasure of knowing Sebastian Bach. Great guys. They're entitled to their opinions. But I mean, they're all using Pro Tools in the studio to make their music and make their shows. So they're using technology out the yin yang as well. It's just part of the game, man. But if you're going to let it take over, then okay, it takes over. But, again, there's certain artists that have let it go so far, like Motley Crue, who were recently here in Vancouver. Like, I'm going to be honest, I phoned up a mutual friend of ours, Brent, and said, "Hey, are you working on the stadium show?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Great, because I just want to come down and watch Joan Jett and that other opening band that was like some fucking LA club band that got lucky from Nikki Sixx or whoever." And those are the only two bands I watched. I just quaffed a couple Budweisers and I got the hell out of there at 6:30 at night and I went home because they were to me, the bands that were going to deliver the most. And I was totally impressed with both acts that night. And there was not any enhancement on their things. Def Leppard have been using it for years. Motley Crue have been using it for years. Poison, I'm sure, are using it. I haven't been to a Poison show probably since 1989. I wouldn't know really. But they're all great people.
The Poison thing was pretty pure. I mean, but they've been playing the same hour for 20 years, so it's kind of down. And Def Leppard, despite the electronic side of it, they sounded incredible. Like, and you could Joe's still putting the effort in. So it's
Joe's vocals
there, and
live.
those guys can play, and Mars can still play, and all the rest of it.
Well, did you?
But it was very interesting.
Did you hear?
Has anybody here seen a Muse show where 99% of the show is on track? I mean, I can't even be in the room. I mean, the popcorn guy at the stadium's got more integrity than Muse does for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're just, everything is recorded with that band.
I didn't know that. I've never seen it.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, again, the music's great, but when they go to hit a backing vocal, they're 12 feet away from their microphone, and it sounds great.
No, Brent, did you hear that you just mentioned Mick Mars? I just heard a rumor, I think just today or maybe yesterday, that there's a rumor floating around, and this is how things get started in rock and roll so often. John 5 is slated to maybe replace Mick Mars on another run.
It comes back to what we talked about before. It's like, you get it out there, you get, and I'm in the business, so I'll just walk it very, very carefully. But, you do the stadium show, you put it out there, you see what works at the end of it. It's like building a baseball team or a hockey team or anything. You build it, you send it out. How did we perform? We're great. Mick's having a hard time. Okay. Can Mick still come on tour? I mean, look at Tommy busted up his ribs on the beginning of the thing.
They had a replacement drummer.
He does 3 songs. He does whatever. It's going to happen. However, that's not the guy I would have replaced in that band. Regardless, I mean,
right, exactly.
I was saying to myself, and listen, all jokes aside, I mean, we've seen really good Vince before-ish, and we've seen not so good Vince. I would have loved them to bring Karabi out for a little bit on this, and just because they get along really well. And I know we're nerding out here now on talk, but I think it would have been kind of cool to have a bit of a, if you're opening the door to John 5 coming in, and you might as well open the door to anyone that's ever been involved. And that's with anything. I think they've put the team on the ice. They've seen what worked. If Mick is having a hard time, there's just,
we're going to have to back to the Pantera thing again. I think we're just going to have to get used to this happening in rock and roll a lot more often, whether we like it or not. It just seems to be what's going to happen. And I guess if I owned a company or a brand, Pantera, Kiss, whatever it is, I might want to keep working too, to make sure my kids are taken care of when it's all over. And you can't blame them.
Look what happened with Tommy, right? Tommy played a couple songs, then he left, another guy comes in, and then he plays the piano, and he doesn't, like, if they replaced and bring John 5 out there, John 5 doesn't have the feel that Mick Mars does. So it's just going to sound different. There's going to be track. Sorry.
They'll definitely get enhanced.
Wolfgang sounds like Eddie Van Halen, but no one sounds like Mick Mars. So John's going to come out and play the parts.
Jeff Beck sounds like Mick Mars, because that's what that's where he stole all the shit from.
You can look at the Vince Neil solo stuff online and see what his band is doing. They're giving a good effort, but it's not going to have the blues element to it because it's Mick. So Mick's going to maybe go off into the sunset, and they'll bring John in, and maybe Mick will come out every 3 shows. I mean, Foreigner doesn't even have a member in the band, and they're selling out everywhere.
And my buddy said Foreigner kicked ass when he saw him. I laughed at him.
Absolutely.
That they kick ass. I
saw sure they do.
But I'm just Motley Crue and Foreigner are two different things. But
they've done that. It's a great lineup. They do it really well. They sound and look like Aerosmith. They got. I'm not going to yell
off the porch.
No, you're not. But it's just like, but everybody's going to have an opinion on, depending on how much they love the artist as well.
Fair enough. Yeah. That's a good point. It depends on how much you love the artist. How
much you drink in the Kool-Aid. Me, I haven't been to a Motley Crue show in over 12 or 15 years. I saw them, how bad they were doing backing tracks 12, 15 years ago, and I walked out. So
I love I love that with them coming back with Carnival of Sins. I love that tour. I thought it was great. Thought it was a great comeback. It looked awesome. And no one
yeah,
can, and they don't apologize. Nikki doesn't apologize. They put this stuff out on DVD. I've got it right here, the DVD from there. There
sure.
was post work done on that. So Eddie, speaking to Nikki or speaking to Motley Crue or going through, I don't think you can rip everybody. You
Nope.
just kind of have to like pick your battles a little bit. And I'm sure there's going to be a point, where Sebastian, he's going to give it the college try, but there's going to be some moments there where he's not going to be able to sing Quicksand Jesus.
Oh yeah.
And he's
Look,
going
the
to,
other thing is
I mean?
age. Like, as you age, the voice gets pretty like hard to do what it needs to do to make the fans, feel like they're getting their money's worth. Robert Plant said it many years ago. He would not get back into Led Zeppelin because he can't sing the way the fans want him to sing. Yeah. So that's the biggest reason why Led Zeppelin never got back together. His integrity was, I can't make it sound like Led Zeppelin. So he just, he didn't want it. He didn't want to go down looking like a fool. And so now he just does what he does. And that's why Led Zeppelin have never really done anything more than, that O2 special. So it gets really tough with the voices. We're starting to see that. Paul Stanley's had a lot of trouble with his voice. Joe Elliott's had trouble with his voice. There was some stuff earlier this year with John Bon Jovi that was sounding like he needed, to just get off the stage immediately. Maybe he just, whatever, cracked something. I don't know. But I mean, the voice is a really, really tough thing to do. It's not the same as a guitar rig or a drum kit. It's a very, very tough thing to replicate. And that's why we see a lot of tracks going back to the topic at hand. But again, there's a lot of artists that eventually you just can't pull it off night in and night out. It's too hard. I'm
not opposed to tracks, Darren. I don't think you're opposed to them, Lyle. I don't think you're opposed to them.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, hell, I've worked with lots of bands that use tracks. It's part of the game. It's just it's part of the game. I've managed bands that use tracks. I've managed bands that bury a guitar track. It is what it is, and sometimes drummers use samples of certain things in the show. Or every band uses an intro. So right there, that's a track. Like it's part of showbiz. It's when it takes over, or when the band is getting so bad that they're reliant on it. It kind of just wrecks it for me.
Didn't it start at a club in LA? Wow. Because you're an Eddie fan. Like, there was a band in LA that played a show. And it made it to Twitter that none of them were playing their instruments, but the whole song was playing.
I can't remember who that was, but I remember
I think it was Eddie that started that whole thing, which was
it's frustrating, right? You go and lay your money down, and you certainly want it to be live. You're paying for a live show, and when it starts to be very evident that it's not live, you're jaking your fans. So that's where it started. It doesn't matter who the band was. It could have been any of the three of us standing there going, shit, is this live? This is, you know what I mean? Like,
Rock's just getting called out now. It's been in pop forever. Rock's just finally getting called out. That's all.
But we line up to go watch special effects movies under the Marvel or DC brand or this brand or that brand, and we lay our money down knowing that 90% of that flick was CGI and computer graphics and da-da-da-da-da. And we go, and now we take our kids and we buy them swag, and special effects are here to stay. They're not going away. Again, it's just about how much you're going to let it take over your rock and roll.
Yeah, if it makes the band lazy or they use it as a crutch, then I'm out. It's like, well, you're not, no point even being here, right? But if it's an enhancement, like you say, I wonder how many bands that started out without using much in the way of effects or backing tracks got lazy because they realized, well, this is pretty easy. We can get super hammered the night before and coast through a show or two.
I'll say it from my concert producing days because I don't work for those companies anymore. I worked on shows from Ricky Martin, Spice Girls, all kinds of pop artists that, of course, you're going to say, but you know what? Again, it comes down to consistency. The vocal would be there at about 40% to keep them in time because they're also running around a lot and to keep them in tune so that when you're running around, I mean, you got your aerobic going. You're going from one side of the stage to the other. There's cues, there's lights, there's pyro. You got to be in the right place at the right time all night, including in your ear with the in-ear monitor. They need to know exactly where they need to be note for note. And again, those shows are worth $2 to $4 million a night. So the audience has a high expectations when you're selling to teenage girls. So if that consistency isn't there, then in today's online world, you just get absolutely murdered. And your tour goes from being the hottest thing in the world to, toilet paper. And, the tours are just worth so much. So they do a lot of tracks for consistency and to just put that artist in the right place. Doesn't mean that they're doing everything 100% onto track. Some are, but there's a lot that aren't.
So they didn't draw the picture, they traced it. And then they color it in. Then they color it in when they're live, right?
That's right. So I don't know. Again, it's not going to change. Again, especially at the arena level, man, there's always a little trick going on. Always. Saw it a couple of weeks ago here with Roger Waters. There was parts of that show that was all on track, man. There was parts of there was whole parts of Roger Waters' show that were on track. Piano parts, vocal parts, bass parts.
I just don't think you can lump it all in. I mean, you just can't lump it all in. It's there's just a different every artist is offering a different thing, and I do see the frustration from Eddie's side of like, you had to cancel a show because you forgot your laptop. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, and that just starts a pissing match.
By the way, that's great show prep for a jock.
Well, exactly, right. But hey, at least the artist was honest, right? I mean, like, hey, we have stuff to track. I mean, what were they supposed to do? Go up there and make an ass of themselves?
Yeah.
And something that they're unprepared for, and give an audience a show that's half baked and charge them full price.
They're all going to sit on a round table like this, and they're all going to shake hands. And then Sebastian's going to end up on stage with Falling in Reverse because he kind of needs the promo because he's going to have a new record coming out because his old band just put a record out that's really good. Anyways, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this week on the Brent on Tour podcast. Awesome to have you guys back on the show. We could do hours and hours and hours, I'm sure, of these subjects. Hopefully you'll come back again. We'll do another roundtable in a couple of weeks because, like the music business, there's always something to talk about. Lyle, thanks for bringing up the Pantera. I actually had it on my list and I completely forgot to bring it up. But that was a great chat, and it gave me no wonder you guys never wanted to leave the radio station. I mean, I would just sit around and talk music all day. It's the best.
No, we just play.
Tell me what's going on with you guys before I let you go. Lyle?
Well, working at a label, we're actively recruiting artists for Crank Music, and working on that, and just building out our 2023. So we're looking at artists from basically all over the world and all kinds of genres, and building a team to support it, and trying to just kind of go project by project to do something fun and special, and just keep on enjoying life in the music business. And also I manage a great Canadian classic rock band called Took. We got a couple of great shows coming up in Western Canada, Winnipeg, Saskatoon. I think we're doing a couple in Regina before the end of the year, and a bunch of stuff coming up in Alberta, and more festivals in 2023, all coming out. So, and putting out some new music, new video. So yeah, that's with Todd Kearns, who's on that Sebastian Bach record that's coming up, in case you didn't know that. And Brent Fitz, both from Slash's band, Corey Churko from Shania Twain's band, Shane Gallus, who's played in bands like Michael Schenker and Bees from Japan. So they're wicked musicians who I have the time of my life with. We get a great crew, great show, and it's real rock and roll.
No backing tracks, no laptop.
You never know. Darren, what's going on with you, buddy?
Still flying around in the airplane a couple times a day, reporting on traffic crashes in Vancouver. There's never any shortage of that in this city. And doing the morning show for Whistler FM as well, that I do right from my house, right where I'm sitting right now. And the newest thing, and I'm really, really excited about this, doing a show there's a new station in Vancouver called Sonic Radio. It's an alternative station. They happen to be on the same dial position that XFM used to be on. I was on XFM for the entire duration of that station's existence back in the early 2000s. So they've asked me, and I've agreed to go back and do a show on Sundays called Resurrection Radio. They spell resurrection with a big X in the middle, and the X is actually the font from the XFM logo.
So dope.
Kind of got me excited, and I've done a few episodes of that, and it's going really well so far. So basically that one focuses on music from the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of the same stuff that I would have played back at XFM back in the day. So it's a music heavy, music intense show, and so far I'm really enjoying it. It's going well.
Gotta say, man, Sonic back on the air. That station is a breath of fresh air for rock bands.
It really is, isn't it? And
it really is.
Yeah.
It really
and
is.
They've got
We're lucky to get that.
They've got some amazingly talented jocks on that station too. I mean, when I listen to that lineup, it's like, holy smokes, man! And a rare thing in this day and age, they've got pretty much a complete air staff. Outside of maybe overnights, there's somebody on the air at all times. When's the last time?
That's to track. Then is that what you're saying?
What's that? No track, no backing tracks. It's all live, my friend.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna pull a radio trick out that I learned from listening on the radio. Lyle Chasse, Darren Grieve, check them all out. Thanks for coming back on the Brent on Tour podcast. This is we're at episode 110, I think. So you guys are part of the history, and I really, really appreciate you being here. This is a classic radio thing. Stick around for a minute, gentlemen, and I'll be right back with you on the thing. But I appreciate it. That is the Brenton on Tour podcast for another week. A big thanks to my friends at Partake. Look at these guys. Non-alcoholic beer. Yep. Just bringing them back into the mix. They have a ton of stuff. They've sent me more stuff. They got a blonde. They got a rattler now. They got a bunch of different products for anyone interested in not drinking for a little while, maybe. Like myself, it's great for a podcast to drink while you're doing it. But keep you safe. And also, it's like 10 calories, something like that. It's vegan, it's gluten-free, it's everything. It's my favorite non-alcoholic beer that I've discovered in my journey along here, and we'll get into that in the coming weeks. I've got a few people coming on to talk about the Sober on Tour series and being sober on tour, including some great products and some other people, so they're coming on board in the coming weeks. So thanks to my friends at DeanBlundell.com and everybody over there for hosting. And we'll see you guys all next week. That is the Brenton on Tour podcast. And I'm so happy that my friends are here this week. Check them out everywhere you see them. Thanks, everybody. Bye.